Shown on screen are figures. 141,798. That's actually the number of pre-trial detention prisoners awaiting legal assistance on as of May 31, 2018. 110 million Filipinos needing legal assistance and to be served, supposedly, by only 2,096 lawyers from Public Attorney's Office in 2018. That's roughly asking one POW lawyer to represent and handle the concerns of 52,500 Filipinos. So these were the figures. Now, this was the reality on the ground that gave birth to CLEP, or the Clinical Legal Education Program, in 2019. And so 3 years thereafter, we are happy and fortunate and proud to be having this conversation about how clinical legal education and legal aid had been really potent, effective tools to achieving and enhancing access to justice, not only in the Philippines, but also across Asia. And so we are fortunate to be having this conversation and sharing this conversation and this platform with various shakers and movers of CLEP and legal aid in the Philippines and in Lao PDR. First, we have Thip Noan Sevong. Thep is the Senior Law Program Officer of the Asia Foundation of Lao People's Democratic Republic. Thep is a lawyer with more than 10 years of professional experience. She currently serves as Senior Law Program Officer at the Asia Foundation's office in Vientiane, Lao PDR, where she helps to manage the implementation of the Legal Aid Support Program, especially working alongside the Ministry of Justice, the Lao Bar Association, and the non-profit organizations which implement the legal aid service across the country. We are also sharing the conversation with Bruce Lasky. Bruce Lasky is the co-director of the Bridges Across Borders Southeast Asia Community Legal Education Initiative, or BABSICL. And we also have Professor Theodore Te, the CLEP Director of the UP College of Law. BBE number 23 po ba kayo, sir? Yes. Attorney Te is currently engaged as the Law Reform Specialist of the University of the Philippines Law Center and a professorial lecturer in the university's College of Law. In addition to teaching criminal law, Attorney Te is handling special projects for the college and UP Law's Clinical Legal Education Program. And then we have Attorney Bert Estrada, the President of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, fresh from the National Legal Aid Summit in Bacolod. I don't know how many hours you were able to get. You get some sleep na po, President. Attorney Estrada is a member of the Bukidnon Tagoloanon tribe, an indigenous community in Malaybalay City, Bukidnon. He is a dato in the said tribe, anointed with the name Dato Manhan Ayan, which in English means once he organizes, fix and prepare, or one who organizes, fix and prepares, or arrange things. And we also have Attorney Fatima Garcia Yap, the Senior Program Officer of the Asia Foundation Philippines. Attorney Fats, or Attorney Fatima, as is indicated in this note, is currently the Senior Program Officer for the Legal Aid Project of the Foundation. She joined TAF in 2012 after passing the bar and has since implemented a number of projects on human rights, legal reform, and access to justice since then. So we will begin this conversation. our dream conversation now coming to reality. So, as in any conversations, we'll start with first maybe introducing ourselves, or by also maybe sharing with our online and on-site participants what we do. We'll start off with FIP.
Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me here. And very good opportunity to share our experience from Laos. The Asia Foundation in Laos has been working with the Ministry of Justice and Lao Bar Associations to first pilot the legal aid office in Laos in 2006. And since that we see the success of that our works, and then we continue to work with them on the legal aid office. And now we have about 94 legal aid office under the Ministry of Justice. And we also support the Lao Bar Associations to have their own legal aid office. Now they have about 15 legal aid office throughout the countries. We also work with the non-for-profit associations that they have specialized on the women's rights. And a part of that, we also work collaborations closely with the BAPSICO, that we support the Faculty of Law and the Political Science at the National University of Laos, that they wrote their first legal aid program, the CLE programs there. And we also expand our work to Faculty of Law and the administrations at the Champasak University, and also work with the college here, National Institute of Justice. This one is also under the Ministry of Justice supervisions about the law college there, to helping them to develop their own legal aid, not legal aid, the CLE program there. Because here in Laos, we have just only the first one here at the Faculty of Law, which is not enough, that we have only 6 law colleges throughout the countries. So that's why this is very important for the Asia Foundation there to work closely with those people. And apart from that, we also work to have those law colleges to do the mock trials in each year in order to have the platform for the student to have the practical learnings, and then they can use their practical learning to apply to their communities, to their lives, and then in order to inspire them to be more the ethical lawyer for the future. This is how that the Asia Foundation works closely with the government counterparts and the Lao Bar Association and the law faculty in Laos.
Salamat, Tip. Next, we have Bruce.
So thank you. And again, it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm thinking back to 2004, the first time I came to the Philippines and brought a delegation from Cambodia to look at the CLE work that had been going on at University of Philippines and Ateneo and others. I'm Bruce Lasky. We said I'm one of the directors of probably one of the funniest named organizations in the world called BAPSICO. So just think of bicycle or popsicle. There's a whole reason why it's called BAPSICO, and it's all positive, but just bear with us. It is. We do a lot of stuff. And one of the core things we do, we've got 3 banners over here. One of the main things we do is we help to develop or strengthen. Can everybody do this? Everybody do this. We help. Great. Okay, we help to develop or strengthen CLE programs in Asia, and we've outgrown the name, so we would say globally. And we're doing this in Laos. We also help to support. Can anybody see what else is on there? What else is on there? Can you see? Everybody got better eyesight than me. There's clinical. What is it? Legal aid. Right. Okay. And what else is on there? And pro bono. So these are some of the many things that we do. And Laos is one of our core countries that we work in partnership with Asia Foundation for many years. And we work with university partners in Laos, but in many countries around the world to strengthen. Everybody do this again. Everybody do this, right? Okay, strengthen their CLE programs. And then we also work with legal aid to strengthen. Everybody do this again. Everybody strengthen legal aid. Okay, good. And we also do this to strengthen, one more time, pro bono. Okay, but this is important because you see there's 3 banners. And that means, everybody put up 3 fingers. That means there's 3 things. There's CLE, That's one finger. One finger, everybody, one finger. Two fingers, legal aid. And there's pro bono, three. They're not the same thing. They're not the same thing. We're going to talk about that today. But they work together, and we're going to talk about that. And that's a lot of what we do in Laos and other places. They're not the same thing, but everybody do this. Everybody do this. They support each other. And that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. Thank you for having me here.
Which I think is a perfect segue to Professor Ted's introduction.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Ted Te. I teach at the University of the Philippines as well as in the Ateneo Law School and the De La Salle College of Law. And this particular panel is an intersection of two things that I have been doing for most of my professional life, and both of which I do. And I have done for a long time and I love, which is teaching and mentoring students and providing access to justice and doing legal aid work. So when I saw the topic for this panel, I said, okay, this is something that I would probably totally enjoy, both as being part of the panel and listening to the other resource persons. And so yeah, I've been what else? I've been a human rights and civil rights lawyer for practically, well, all my professional life. I've been teaching law since 1995. Okay, yeah, until now. So, yes. So when I was very, very young, I started very, very young. So thank you very much.
Before we have President Bert, we were mentioning, because Bruce was mentioning about the difference, the distinction between the three components. Professor, you were saying to me that we were supposed to be talking about legal aid as well as clinical legal education, and you said these two are different and in context as well, no?
Yes, one of the things that I think is important to emphasize is that when we do talk about clinical legal education, we talk about teaching in a very specific way. You know, we teach through allowing our students to encounter and to experience, you know, and to do most of the things by themselves, but being mentored by lawyers, by supervising lawyers. And that's different from providing legal aid, because providing legal aid, that's a service. Clinical legal education, that's really formation, that's really education. So I think we need to look at that difference, because if we mix them up, the tendency is like Bruce was saying earlier, we don't strengthen both, we weaken both. So once we keep the distinction, then we can strengthen both, because we will be able to see the need to strengthen both. Okay. So I think that's one important point to make.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Now we go to President Birds, fresh from Legal Aid Summit.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Dean. So as mentioned, as National President, of course, of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, overseeing 86 chapters in the entire Philippines, with about 50,000 active lawyers. We have 85,000 registered lawyers in the role, but we believe there's only around 50,000 active lawyers in the Philippines. And of course, we have our National Center for Legal Aid. Director Eric was here earlier. I think he'll be coming back. And our Director for Chapter Affairs, Attorney Jam. In every of our chapters, at 86 chapters, they have their own legal aid centers as well. And every chapter has a legal aid director. And so as president and together with my directors, we go around the Philippines, visit our chapters, look at how they are also implementing their legal aid programs. And very recently, we've been able to work together with the Asia Foundation in Cebu and in Zamboanga City, and worked with our 4 law schools together with our law student practitioners, and looked into how clinical legal education and the legal aid programs of the IBP can really complement each other. And we've seen such synergy in having these activities. And of course, before becoming national president, I've been active in our chapters for 10 years, where I once was legal aid director early on in my legal career and as a student. And that's why I absolutely support this program, because studying, I was already a paralegal in a law office. So the clinical skills was there. But at the same time, because my boss was chapter president of a chapter, I was already a volunteer in the IBP as a jail decongestion officer, which taught me also the value of being active in the organization that provides such a service to the public. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Bert. Next, we have Attorney Pat.
Thank you. I am TIP's Filipino counterpart. I am with the Asia Foundation Philippines office. The Asia Foundation is an international development organization. We are in 18 countries in Asia. We've been in the Philippines since 1954. And through our projects, we work with the government, civil society, and the private sector to address the issues of the country. So through our projects, we help strengthen democratic institutions, improve education, support economic growth, improve education as well, and foster peace and development in Mindanao, and strengthen the rule of law. So to strengthen the rule of law, the Asia Foundation in the Philippines has the Legal Aid Project. This is strengthening the rule of law through legal aid clinics in the Philippines. So we work with the Supreme Court, the the Legal Education Board, and the Philippine Association of Law Schools to support them in the implementation of the revised law student practice rule. We also work directly with the law schools in strengthening their clinical legal education programs and to build a national network of legal aid clinics to ultimately to improve the public's access to reliable legal aid services.
Thank you. So I think that the common denominator we all can agree is that in our line of work, we have used clinical legal education or legal aid program as tools for access to justice. And so we start this conversation, I think that by first telling or sharing to us our own perception, perspective, evaluation, assessment of the state of access to justice in our jurisdictions, in the case of FIP and Bruce, and probably in the case of President Bert and Professor Ted, of access to justice, the state of access to justice in the Philippines from the lens of your own work or roles. We start with Thep.
To me, the state of the access to justice, just people can access to justice equally. So that's why we come here, and it's clearly that the access to justice in Laos, we already indicate in our constitutions, meaning that everyone can file a complaint to the court fairly, and then their complaint must be resolved by the law as well. And to interpret from the wording from the constitutions, we also have the legal aid decree. So that's why the Ministry of Justice take the action of this one by operating the legal aid office throughout the countries. And they also allow the law bar associations who have the right to represent the client at the court, to the people, to the court. And then, so that's why we at the Asia Foundation working with them, alongside with them. But just only through this organization is not enough, because when we talk about the legal aid office under the MOJ, they can go to the community to disseminate about the law, the type of thing, but which is not enough. So that's why we have to work with our partners like the law college, that we use the CLE programs as one of the channels to encourage the people can access to justice. The law students there, they can go easily to the communities and they can stay there with the communities to disseminate their rights. So when the people, they know about their rights, and then easily for them to claim their rights through the institutions. The law students there under the CLE programs, like we mentioned, there in Laos, they cannot represent the client at the court. It's things different from here. But they are also the person that the key person to refer the case to the legal aid office. So that's why the state of the justice, they're just to ensure and skill that the people have the equal right access to justice, and they have the right to have the lawyer to represent them at the court.
So we have access to justice in Lao that's already embedded in the Constitution itself, just like in the Philippines. Bruce, what about, you can share your experience even outside Lao because you have extensive experience as well in the rest of Asia. Yeah.
Sure, and I'm originally from, if you can't tell, I'm originally from the United States, and if you can't tell, I'm originally from New York. But I was a legal aid lawyer in the United States. But I've been in Asia for 23 years. In all parts and lived. So it's a long time, and I've seen much greater access to justice in many places. I've seen people complain they think things go backwards, but I'm an optimist, and I've seen bar associations get stronger. I've seen universities develop better legal teaching, better clinical programs. I've seen lawyers, when I first came to Laos and other places, there were very, very few lawyers, no women lawyers, very few. So I've seen an upward trend on access to justice. And a lot of that, in part, is due to the development of human resources, people. I've been a lawyer since 1991, so we're saying, I'll tell you, I'm proud to be a lawyer. I'm proud to be a lawyer. But I've also found that access to justice is not only about lawyers, it includes lawyers. But I use a broader term, legal service providers. Legal service providers assist people to have access to justice. Sometimes you don't even need that. You empower communities. The Philippines is a great example. So you have community empowerment. Communities are doing it by themselves. Then they have allies, which can be legal service providers. It can be lawyers plus. But in doing that, I've seen in this trend the better development of legal service providers. We are all involved in this whole pro bono movement that has been great. And I think that has, and the gathering here and what's been done in the Philippines in sort of requiring law schools to have these clinical programs, that's an example of the strengthening of access to justice. It's a really positive trend. I'll say this again. I've been a lawyer since 1991, 30-something years. People tell me lawyer jokes, and I'm intolerant. I tell people, look, I'm proud to be a lawyer. You don't make brain surgeon jokes. You don't make lawyers help people, and we should be proud of that. And if you're part of educating people, you should be proud. But that's what we need to focus on. And we're not looking at making smarter lawyers, because there's a lot of smart lawyers that help people steal money, okay? Access to justice is about, we said it, it's the education of the brain, but also the heart, and then giving them the skills to do it. That's been my experience. Thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Prof. Ted?
Let me answer that by showing a few slides, if
Sure.
that's okay. I think I gave my slides earlier.
Prof, hindi ka masyadong prepared.
Yeah. No, not yet. There we go. Oops. Yeah, can we have the first slide? Yeah. So, let me just answer your question by saying this is really an exercise in reimagining legal education. In the University of the Philippines, we've been doing this for close to 50 years. The Office of Legal Aid was an experiment in clinical legal education. When it started, I think Bruce mentioned this earlier during lunch, people were probably horrified that there were students appearing in court, handling actual cases involving actual people with actual interests, but it was an experiment. But again, if we talk about legal education, and I think we mentioned that earlier, that you need to imagine the context, and it's not working. There you go. We need to look at the context. Law always operates and affects people's, not just individual persons, communities, groups of people, and so that's what clinical legal education is. So, how does clinical legal education operate in relation to access to justice? It affects people. It affects groups of people, communities, specific sets, clusters, sectors of people. And so we need to understand the context of how we are going to do these things. And so, I look at our current rule, and I like it because we've been operating on a very old rule, almost 50 years. But then, the Supreme Court comes in and amends the rule, expands it, broadens it, and that by itself is great. But of course, there's one thing that the Supreme Court set as a purpose, to produce more lawyers, to produce practice-ready lawyers. And I take it off from what Bruce said earlier. It's not just lawyers, right? Access to justice is not just about providing more lawyers who can go to court. It's more than that, right? But I remember, I'm not sure if you can read it because, sorry, it's white. But during the pandemic, I had the occasion to speak to some of the deans here and some of the clinical directors, clinical program directors here. I was very happy to meet you in person, not just over Zoom. I realized some of you are really tall. Some of you are, wow, that's what you look like without the mask. But I digress. One of the studies really that came out was this McCrate study. And, he came out with two very important lists. The first list is 10 fundamental lawyering skills. And if you look at the list, I don't think we disagree with that, right? That's what lawyers need. That's what law schools are supposed to produce. But the second list, he says, there are four fundamental, there we go. Nope, there we go. 4 fundamental values of the profession. And here we may probably have some differences, right? Provision of competent representation, promotion of justice, fairness, morality, improvement of the profession, professional self-development. You have questions. You start to operationalize. You ask, what's the context? What's the context for saying competent? Again, people may still be horrified. Judges may be horrified that a fourth-year student, a senior law student, is appearing in his or her court or signing a pleading, right? Or assisting a client in a negotiation. And so how do we define competent? Is it simply because they graduate from law school, then we presume them to be competent? What's justice, fairness, morality? It can take an entire conference just to talk about those things. And so, the question I always ask is, what about the question, what if practice ready isn't enough in relation to access to justice? Because, again, it's not just about lawyers. It's not just about providing lawyers. I think it's providing a mindset, right? Because if the issue isn't just practice, if the issue is poverty, if the issue is inequality, lack of access, then how does just becoming a lawyer ready to practice in court help? It probably won't. In my experience, it won't. What if the question is human dignity, right? Being locked up in a jail cell meant for 10, and there are about 100 in that jail cell, right? What about if it involves the killing of people? And so if you're a practice-ready lawyer, yes, you may be able to appear in court, but these things will come back over and over again. And so you're talking about access to courts, but it may not necessarily be access to justice. So I think as educators, we need to take a look at this, right? The way that clinical education impacts access to justice, we have to have programs that are contextual. They take into account what we need, what the community needs. They should be committed, meaning resources. There should be resources committed, not just financial, personal, administrative resources, even intellectual resources, people who can come up with ideas. It should be relevant and it should be responsive, meaning it should address what is needed to be addressed, and it should be responsive, meaning it should change if it needs to be changed. Right? And so that's where I think I grapple a lot with our rule and the existing practice. And then I think Bruce mentioned this earlier, and I totally agree. There is a complementary relationship. Providing lawyers and providing access, that's complementary, but they're not the same. So they should go together. So in the same way, when as educators, and I'm fortunate I'm not a dean, so I don't have to worry about this. I can just be the one to just toss out this idea and say, can you just do this, right? For example, you think about curricula, right? And I know that, Dean, I'm sorry, I still call you Dean because you'll always be Dean Joanne to me. But Dean Joanne has an experience with developing curriculums, for example. So the curricula for teaching law, right? which for lack of a better word, I call the doctrinal curriculum, the one that teaches you all the doctrines, all the cases, all the statutes. That doesn't take into account a curriculum for clinical teaching, right? The negotiations part, the mentorship part, the ethics part, the character building part, how to handle a loss, how to handle, being dispersed at a strike area, how to handle talking to a client who has just lost a case, how to handle talking to a client who insists on paying you even when the client cannot afford to pay you, just because the client feels ashamed and embarrassed that she or he cannot give you anything because you're handling it for free, right? Those things we don't teach in law school. But those should go together, right? They should be complementary, they should be integrated, and they should be programmatic, meaning one should build on the other. Because, again, we're not just creating lawyers, right? We're not just giving skills. I think in a way we're forming people with character, with ethics. Because what's the point of a skilled lawyer? Again, I take off from Bruce, kindred spirits probably, we think alike. A skilled lawyer can help someone cheat another person or get away with murder, right? Literally, that's a skilled lawyer. But only a skilled lawyer with character, with the right character, can assist someone in getting access to justice, not just access to the courts. So yeah, those are what we should be doing. And so let me just end with this, It's one of my main beefs. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, right? Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Legal education must not just be about the bar, because there's so much that we need to do in order to make clinical education relevant to access to justice. And it just cannot be about helping our students pass the bar. Yes, passing the bar is important. Definitely. And I'm glad I'm not a dean, because the dean has to worry about that. I'm just one of the faculty members bugging the dean about, can you provide more clinical programs? But, it's important that we say it's not just about passing the bar. It's about when they pass the bar, they're not just ready skills-wise, but they're ready character-wise. And that's the only way we can make the two relevant. So let me just end. I've spoken too much. Thank you.
Actually, it's true that clinical legal education and legal education in general should not just be about passing the bar or passing an exam. But I just would really like to point out that if clinical legal education is also experiential education, that in fact it will also be very helpful in making us all pass the bar. Yeah. So that while it should not be the goal, it can in fact help us also achieve one of the goals, which is
I agree.
to produce lawyers.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thank you. So can we now have President Bert?
Okay.
Yeah.
I also get my slides. It's about 50 slides. Just joking. Anyway,
I really love this panel. So not prepared.
I mentioned this during our recently concluded Legal Aid Summit in Bacolod. No? So I was asked to speak about the challenges of the integrated bar of the Philippines when it comes to access to justice. So the figures that were shown, that you showed, Dean, earlier, you mentioned were the reasons for the creation of this clinical legal education program, to me, unfortunately, has not substantially changed even before 2018. So based on the figures that we have studied, and I shared this during the summit, again, 85,000 plus lawyers in the role, about 50,000 lawyers active. We presume that about half would be private practicing lawyers, or 25,000 active private practicing lawyers. The other half would be in government service and maybe some in business. But on the records from our 86 chapters showed that there were only 1,219 actively and continually participating volunteer lawyers in the integrated bar of the Philippines. And so we mentioned that perhaps one of the reasons is that, other than what Dean said, Sir Ted said, that too much focus on the bar was made during our formative years in law school, but also because I said that because pro bono work and legal aid work has so much been seen as an act of charity, and so we say that only a sense of duty to the community, to the public, can really bring about lawyers in doing this public service. And because the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, in its threefold mission, one of which is to assist the lawyers perform their public functions. And that is why we have we have partnered with so many our partners here, American Bar Association Rule of Law Initiative, the Asia Foundation, and different organizations on different issues, rainbow rights, even government offices. We've tried those, and we've looked into also finding support, because we know that pro bono work and legal aid work, although voluntary on the part of the lawyers, is actually not also an entirely free service, because it costs. It has cost. That's why we say IBP legal aid lawyers are not just pro bono lawyers. We are abono lawyers, because we spend, and we try to find ways that we can no longer be abono lawyers if we have more support. And so we lobbied from Congress and asked from the usual 30 million peso legal aid subsidy that has been mentioned. We've been successful and had an increase to 130 million for 2022 and 2023. But we explained during the Access to Justice Summit that if you really look at it, when it's divided into the many activities of the Integrated Bar and the 86 chapters, it just redounds to about 8,000 pesos per month per chapter. And that just takes care of the operational cost of the chapter. And so we ventured also into looking into other sources of funds to support this activity. And recently we've had a clarification from our Commission on Audit allowing memorandum of agreements between IBP chapters and local government units for expansion of the legal aid program, which we did in our chapter in Bukidnon way back in 2015. So despite all of the things that we've tried to do, we've seen that perhaps still the best chance, because reformation is quite a challenge. To reform people may be quite a challenge, but we can inspire more people, provide the incentives. We'll be having our unified legal aid rules. We submitted it to the court, and we hope that there will be a final version within 2023 to allow many more lawyers to experience doing pro bono work and legal aid work, and hopefully one day love doing it without feeling compelled. But the best solution still we've seen is the formation aspect in school. And when this is inculcated in our students, that what has always been mentioned as a higher purpose, that sense of duty, then we'll be producing more ethical, socially responsible, and principled lawyers that would be more active in providing this much needed service to the public. So that's why we're here. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Indeed, it is true, now, alongside the institutional changes would have to be more work to cultivate the heart for service and the heart of service, as mentioned by Chair Melanie this morning. So as they have shared with us, Attorney Fats, may we also ask you on the part of the Asia Foundation, what programs had been done to address the access to justice issue? As you know, there's a very nice way of putting it by Professor Ted, that there's access to court, which is dissimilar with access to justice. But what about access to justice, and what programs had TAF been doing in that regard?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, you mentioned it's different, access to justice and access to courts. At the Asia Foundation, we've had several projects. We've had projects with the Supreme Court for legal reform, case decongestion to decongest the court docket. So we did that for 5 years to help decongest the courts. But in 2018, Dean John, you mentioned the context a while ago, the figures, and that's what we were looking at. We were saying 52,000 lawyers to 52,000 Filipinos to just one lawyer. Like, how can we help enhance access to justice for Filipinos? And some of my colleagues and I, we went through OLA in UP, the Office of Legal Aid. We were interns at the Office of Legal Aid when we were in law school. And so we thought about looking at tapping the potential of law students and looking at how many law clinics are there in the Philippines, operational law clinics are there in the Philippines. And we wanted to work with the Supreme Court and the law schools as well to hopefully institutionalize the framework of the clinical legal education programs in the schools that had the law clinics at that time. So that's when we thought we could do this. We could work with the Supreme Court, the Legal Education Board, and law schools. So maybe we can change the framework or institutionalize the framework, have a standard framework for clinical legal education, and then maybe we can encourage the law schools to set up their own clinics, and we can help them design their clinics and help them manage it and also maintain it. So that's when we did the Legal Aid project in 2018. So 5 years later, we're here, and 4 years later, we're here, and we're still working with the law schools and helping them manage their law clinics and helping them reach their respective communities and to be able to provide responsive legal aid assistance. And yeah, so that's what we did with the Legal Aid project.
Thank you. Bruce, what about Bubsicle? Any specific programs you'd like us to learn from in order to aid access or enhance access to justice?
Yeah, so thanks. And I think kind of touching what I brought back before, you know, our organization, as we said, focuses on these three core things: pro bono, legal aid, and clinical legal education. We also focus a lot on professional responsibility and legal ethics. And I think that's what's going on. You're doing this in the Philippines, but our experience with Babsicle, in the sense that we have found over the years that there have been silos between all these different movements. And to really achieve access to justice, and I mean, I think I learned this years ago talking to Carlos Medina Chochoy from Ateneo University. We used to talk about the many roads to justice. There's not just one. That's true, but you've got to kind of merge these roads together, and you can't silo. So you need to bring these movements together. You can have these type of clinical summits, which are beautiful, where you inspire, you bring together, you're sharing examples, and the majority of people here are focusing on clinical work. That's great. You may have a legal aid or pro bono summit, which is great, but keep bringing in others and then having these sort of amalgamated movements where these many roads of justice are brought together. And we at Babsicle do that. We're not the only ones, but we really, really believe in strong collective collaborations, and that's why we work so closely with Asia Foundation, because they're brilliant at it too. Yeah.
Yes, Prof.
If I can add, one thing that is important, particularly in the Philippines, given our current revised student practice rule, is the realization that we are not alone in doing this. For the longest time, UP and maybe Ateneo were the only ones with a clinical program, and so, in a sense, it was pretty lonely because we were the only ones doing it, but now everyone's doing it, and that's a welcome development. But we also must realize that not everyone can do it to the same extent, which is what Bruce was saying, and particularly for those in the regions, for smaller universities, for smaller colleges. For private universities who have a different constituency, right? Even for public universities like the University of the Philippines, wherein we depend on government funding, and therefore we're not so flexible in terms of money, hiring, and everything. we need to realize that while we're not alone, there are avenues for us to work together. So, but here is where I think it gets a little bit more complicated, because if each school, each university does the clinical program on their own, and so you're forced to put everything up, right? The curriculum, the clinic itself, hire the supervising lawyer, supervise the students, grade, assess, etc., etc. But there's the possibility for working together. Academic consortiums can be put up. In the University of the Philippines, we've expanded our clinic offerings. So, for example, we could probably welcome. And my dean is here, and I know he's probably thinking the same thing. We could probably, for example, welcome a few interns from another school, which probably could not put up the clinics that we have, and then maybe work out, how to grade, work out how to credit the subject, so that the school itself doesn't need to put up the clinic. And so that's what I think Bruce was saying, not working in silos, because that's the only way to move it forward, rather than everyone doing it for themselves. Because that's going to take a lot of time, money, and effort, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Some of us have been doing this for some time, and there are new developments. There are new exciting clinics. I've been hearing about those clinics, and they're exciting. And so I think it's a good opportunity to work together. And so maybe a device like an academic consortium, 2 or 3 universities can just come up with an agreement that for a certain period of time, students from one university can cross-enroll in the other university just for that clinic, for example. And so there's greater benefit for all. So maybe that's one way of pushing it forward.
Which actually responds, even before being asked, to the online question that we received, which is there a relevance for ASEAN or Southeast Asian countries to learn from each other on legal aid and clinical legal education? So, would you like to add anything more, President Bert, on the sharing of Prof. Ted?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think Professor Ted said it all, and we always know that collaboration, as mentioned by Dean this time earlier, that collaboration, learning from each other is always important. And in our chapters, for example, we always have the best practices of our chapters being highlighted, and we are very thankful our chapters also share it very willingly. And now we see more of our chapters also very active in terms of legal aid. And in our CLEP program, for example, when we did a survey, there were already about 20 chapters that have MOAs with law schools. But then when they shared what they did, and then even the templates, then more were forged between IBP chapters and legal aid clinics and schools. So we all have to be open, and even beyond our jurisdiction, and learning from our neighbors is also very important.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. And just brief. So one of the things that goes on, I see Pavina over here holding up the pro bono conference bag. So every year, and this next year will be the 12th year, there's an Asia Regional Pro Bono Conference. Next year is going to be in the Philippines. We're going to talk about that. We're going to have a planning meeting after today. And it focuses on pro bono, but it also includes legal aid and clinical legal education plus. So that is not just ASEAN, it's Asia, but it includes a lot of ASEAN. Next year and going forward, every 2 years, BAPSICLE is going to assist in organizing a regional clinical legal education conference every 2 years. Next year in May, it will be in Chiang Mai, Thailand. There's huge value in having these national summits and inviting some experiences, but then also huge. And then I think we mentioned it earlier, the Chief Justice talked about the Global Alliance Justice Education. They have a worldwide conference every few years. There's huge value in attending those, plus.
True. So, by the way, we can accept questions from or sharing from on-site participants, also from our online participants. Feel free to interrupt us anytime. So, with all of this sharing, I think it's all right to look forward to the very near future. So, may I ask from each of you, what to you are the prospects and the bright plans for clinical legal education, or in the case of IBP, for instance, legal aid in the very near future? We can probably start with President Byrd. Yes?
Thank you, Dean. So, as I mentioned earlier, the Unified Legal Aid Service Rule has been proposed by the Integrated Bar of the Philippines. This was also presented during one of our pro bono summit done last year. And the court told us after our convention in Bacolod that we will have continued study and some dialogues, and hope that next year we come up with a final version of that. So the IBP will continually be active in coming up with that legal aid service rule. And what we did mention, that while we believe that pro bono work and the legal aid service should primarily be voluntary in nature, but we believe that giving the chance for people to experience doing this beautiful work for our people is also important, so that many more gets involved. And we intend to have as many of our chapters forge agreements with our law schools and legal aid clinics. We understand, as I think several times was mentioned earlier, that the lack of supervising lawyers, the lack of lawyers is one of the hurdles that the implementation of this program really faces. And so we see that, and we want many more of our members to be active. And that's why in those rules we have studied and proposed many incentives as well, so that it's not a mere compulsion or mandatory in nature, but there are certain incentives. For example, MCLE credits, credits for your legal aid service for purposes of being lifetime members. And of course, recently the implementing rules for Republic Act 9999 or the legal aid service credit rule law is also implemented. We will also push with that. So we want our chapters to be very much involved in the implementation of the clinical legal education program. We know our students will augment the forces where there are fewer lawyers also doing legal aid. But at the same time, really, we hope that we will get also to produce more socially responsible and principled lawyers in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof, prospects, plans.
I think the prospects are bright. I'll take off from what Fats said earlier. When they were planning this, they drew on their experiences when they were students. I look around the room, I see deans and I see clinic directors who have themselves experienced learning from experience, learning from being mentored. So the clinical experience of learning law. And I see excitement. I see people dreaming of clinics and on themes that probably they wouldn't have thought of many years ago. And so I would say the prospects are bright. Law schools are energized by it, even though, it's difficult because you have to, the administrative requirements are very, very, very difficult. But still, I don't think enthusiasm has been dampened. The Supreme Court is on top of it, and so that's a big plus. So maybe despite the little setbacks in terms of funding, maybe for some lack of supervising lawyers, maybe for some, those won't be insurmountable, I think. So I would say the prospects are pretty bright. So I'm excited. Thank you.
Bruce?
30 seconds. The prospects are amazing. 20 years ago, when we would show up in a place and talk about clinical legal education, people would just stare at us. Now it's a norm. It's a norm, and it's a norm globally. The last group to really jump onto this was Western Europe, because they were so stuck in centuries of tradition of what legal education was supposed to be. That's over. Western Europe is doing it, and so it is a global movement, and so the future is not the future now is bright, and it's only going to get brighter.
And we have FIP.
From the Asia Foundations, when we talk about the figure that you just mentioned before, there's about the number of the pre-trial detentions. Compared to Laos, we have in Laos just only the lawyers about 400 registered lawyers, but throughout the country, the population is going to be 7 million people. So we still need to continue to work with the Lao Bar Association and also the law faculty to produce more the graduate students with the practical experience. Because even though that we have very limited number of the lawyers, but with their skills on how to handle the case or identify the case or ready to be helping the people, they're still not yet ready. So that's why we have to work with them harder and harder. And also we here have the policymaker from the Ministry of Education and Sports. And I will give the floor to him to handle for this and for the future. And we do hope that in the future, still the Asia Foundation will continue to work with our counterparts. Yeah.
Yes, and Attorney Pat.
Thank you. One major insight from the implementation of the project is what Bruce and Sir Ted mentioned. It's that the law schools cannot just put up the clinics, and they cannot work just by themselves. They can't do it alone by themselves. So what we've learned is that it really pays for them to collaborate with one another. And it's not just the law schools, it's also the legal aid service providers in their respective communities. That's why we're very fortunate to have worked with the Integrated Bar of the Philippines. So we worked with them in piloting a referral network system. So we hope to establish a nationwide network wherein it's the law clinics who can be connected to one another and also be connected to various legal aid organizations. So if they have cases and they're overflowing with cases, they can just refer the cases to one another. So I think the prospect of CLEP in the future, I think the next step is really collaborating and interdisciplinary work, because the referral system shouldn't just be legal aid service providers. Bruce mentioned it should also be plus. It's other service providers who can help the clients with whatever they need. And we're starting talks with FSU, Father Saturnino Urios, in Butuan City, and we're thinking about a tax clinic, their law clinic in coordination with the tax department of the university. So something like that, interdisciplinary work to help more people, not just with their strictly legal concerns.
Yes, thank you so much. So time is really short for a conversation that we wish could go on longer for, but because we really had to wrap up already, the key takeaway, I think, is that access to justice is really a common concern. And it being a common concern, collaboration, cooperation, I think, and everyone's help would really be needed. So we initially thought of this to be a conversation which is part of this summit, but I think it's a conversation that to be carried on if we are to continue also with our work in the legal aid as well as in clinical legal education for access to justice. So with that, we've only just begun, if so. And we thank our resource persons for this very enlightening, enriching, inspiring conversation. Hope to continue this conversation in the coming years. Salamat.